Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday, January 23rd, 2023. More 23s in the offing here today. Okay, plenty to catch up on. Of course, as usual, it being a Monday. Well, lots happening. Of course, it is the Lunar New Year, which I guess is, I guess we've sort of subtly shifted to calling it the Lunar New Year rather than just Chinese New Year. It's not just Chinese New Year, of course. Plenty of cultures that celebrate a Lunar New Year, so I guess maybe that was it. Were we being more inclusive? I don't know. The Wall and NAFTA calendar refrigerators not covering East Asia for the most part, NAFTA, but noting the Lunar New Year this year rather than simply the, I don't know what, I guess the less inclusive Chinese New Year. So happy Year of the Rabbit, I suppose, to everybody, as it turns out, except the Vietnamese for whom it's the Year of the Cat. How do you like that? And we all know that because there was that song way back when that actually came to mind all of a sudden. The Year of the Cat. I don't know. I don't know if that was like a huge hit or anything, but for some reason those lyrics stuck with me all the way back from 1975. And I can't tell you how that happened. Al Stewart, the artist in question, and I guess that must have just had heavy radio play back in the day when I listened to the local station and the pop music that was on was that, and young and impressionable, and I had no idea what it was about, and I still don't, but there you have it. Anyway, happy Year of the Cat to everybody else who might be. This is like, not only is this Eastern Orthodox New Year's, this is like really, really Eastern. And probably really, really Orthodox as well. So, okay, we have all of that to get through. Of course, as usual, because today is a weekday, we are operating under the cloud of a mass shooting. There's usually one every day, but we don't always take notice of all the ones that happen. But that one is happening. Here we had the, is it Monterey? Or was that right? Or I, you know what? It's hard to even keep track of all of the details. Of all the, it is incredible that we got to this, that, I did see some people mentioning that they were just getting around to really analyzing and writing about the school shooting in Newport News, Virginia, where a 6-year-old brought a gun to school and very intentionally shot the teacher. And I guess the decent interval had passed when they felt like they could speak about it, except they were interrupted by this mass shooting. As I understand, 10 people killed in the Monterey Park Dance Studio, a dance hall that was rented out for a New Year's party. And so, not clear on, exactly what motive, if motive is even a thing you can talk about with things like this. But the shooter is dead as well, having committed suicide later on. I think if there's anything outstanding or particularly unusual about this, it's that the shooter was rather older than we're used to seeing in these situations, 72 years old. So there's clearly a lot of mystery wrapped up in this one. There are plenty of reports that we could share with you about it, but I don't know. We tend to try to minimize things unless there's some really unusual bent to this. But I don't know what to tell you about this one other than, hey, another one. This keeps happening, and once again, we'll go through the whole thing, and everyone puts out the obligatory thoughts and prayers, and we wait for the next one, I guess, is really all there is to it about these things now. We've kind of come to, I don't know, we can't say we've come to accept them clearly, but it's come to be a routine that we go through, and not only the routine that we go through after these shootings, but of course the fact that another one will crop up before we've fully dealt with the last one. There are many, many other directions we may yet go. Greg Dworkin is here, though, and we'll see what reflections he has on this and other items. Good morning, Greg.
Good morning. Mass shootings always hit close to home.
Yes.
For me and for you who follows this so closely. So when things happen in Virginia, you especially take notice. In this particular case, the shooting happened in a place called Monterey Park, and it's a little different than some of the ones that we're used to, so I think worth going into.
Sure.
The New York Times has a really nice piece, not so much on the shooting itself, but on Monterey Park.
Yeah, okay.
Which is a suburb of Los Angeles. And what had happened is that there was a developer in the 80s, or in the 70s, I guess, named Fred Shea, who promoted the community and sort of built it up and got a lot of middle-class ethnic Chinese residents from home and abroad to move there. In 83, the city made history by naming its first Chinese-American female mayor, Lily Lee Chen. Yeah. There was tension right until recently about whether or not official signs should only be done in, quote, modern Latin lettering.
Oh, I
as
see.
people who used to live there got upset about the changing ethnic nature of the community. This should sound familiar, and so a lot of communities are like that. But the Chinese American community won out. Apparently, there's significant other Asian groups there, not just Chinese, but there's ethnic Chinese from other places. Mm-hmm. So that all sort of blends together a little bit. That's of note because the shooter in this case apparently was Vietnamese.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But it could have been ethnic Chinese from Vietnam. I don't know. His name is spelled Tran, T-R-A-N, but the T-R in Vietnamese is pronounced DJ.
Huh.
And the A-N is pronounced like the first syllable in uncle. So it's Zheng.
Zheng.
Even though it looks like Tran, it's pronounced Zheng.
Okay. That's interesting.
He's elderly. He was in his 70s.
Yes.
In other words, close to my age, so I can say he's elderly. And, about 5 or 6, 7 years older than me. And he used a pistol, not a rifle. And he first went to one specific community dance hall. They were celebrating Lunar New Year, shot it up, and then went to another one. When he got to the second one, he was disarmed by a younger man whose name is Brandon, I believe, Shea, T-S-A-I. Pronounced Shea, the alternate pronunciation, of course, in America is Rabinowitz. But, the point is, it's sort of a complex ethnic community, but different than many of the other communities that we're sort of used to covering. And, this was not a hate crime in the sense that a non-Asian attacked an Asian.
Right.
In that sense. It's unusual in the age of the guy who was, clearly in his 70s, used the gun and not a long gun. And what the motivation was is very unclear. And, of course, the community is devastated. That's a universal.
Yeah. No change there. But, some odd aspects of this. And, of course, I did see some early reports where people said, oh, no, he did have a long gun. Lots of confusion always in these initial reports. And there's always something wrong with the initial reports. But usually there were multiple gunmen.
26-year-old Brandon Shea rested an assault pistol from the gunman's hands.
Assault pistol?
So that's what he had.
No wonder.
In the second shooting. What he used in the first shooting, I don't know. Maybe that's the reason for different.
That could be. I mean, it's just. I only note it only because, initial reports are usually filled with confusion, and sometimes people who are right there are so shocked and scared that they recall the wrong things. This happens.
Right.
It's a weird situation.
So again, it's also an opportunity to learn about different cultures and to learn about different areas that you may otherwise not have been used to. Lunar New Year, for example, or the community of Monterey Park, which may not have been familiar to us.
Or how to pronounce
although
these things.
It's apparently the place to go, to get ethnic Asian food.
It sounds like it probably would be. These, what we used to call, and I think probably, I guess we're now learning, sort of insensitively calling places Chinatowns, where there's large concentrations of Chinese immigrants, but they are far broader than that. And I had a great time in Philadelphia's, I guess we'll say, Asian area. I don't know what the new terminology is, but yeah, I mean, what a melting pot that is, just generally, and a real delight when there's nobody murdering everyone.
Right?
It can be
so.
Very nice.
It's a time to listen more than speak, I think. And a time to learn about the different communities. We're leaving the year of the tiger. We're entering the year of the rabbit.
Right.
And this was all meant to be a great celebration, and obviously that's not the case now.
No, but hopefully,
that's what we know.
Yes. Well, recovery is all we can hope for at this stage, but I think we've covered it pretty well. There's some good material out there. I have a piece from the LA Times, which I guess is a little closer to the action. I'll include it in the roundup. You can read all there is to read about the details, the clinical details that they know about the suspect and where they found him, and et cetera, et cetera. All will be available for you, but we have got to pause to note that this is happening, and there was some unusual aspect to this shooting, which is otherwise a normal aspect of American life now, sadly enough. Okay. Well, many other things actually did happen over the weekend. I don't know if you collected any of them, but I heard about some things. Is there a direction you're interested in going?
Well, at the moment, I think we have to take a look at American politics.
Well, yes, we do.
And
do that.
So, let's turn to that. There's a nice piece by E.J. Dion about will American politics stay stuck? Biden has a plan for that, and the basic difference is that he's trying to recruit people from the other side. It's a theme that Dion has used before when he talked about the death of Mark Shields. Basically, if you're going to be really active, are you going to try to be somebody who recruits, or are you going to or spend all your energy going after heretics? And so Biden's a recruiter. Yes. And so in that sense, he might be able to move the needle a little bit over time, which is what he's done. He's won at times you didn't expect him to win. Because he does wind up, persuading the tiny sliver of people who can be persuaded. But in American politics, that's enough to move the needle at least a little bit. Then when you start winning, sometimes the needle moves further. So things that appeared close turn out in the end not to be so close, and that's one of the things we really need to watch.
Okay.
So I thought that was a useful thing. In a completely different setting here, and it looks like things are happening here at home that may require my only doing like the first half hour, so I may have to end this at 9:30. Jonathan Weiler, who's a political scientist who I like to follow, for his insight into authoritarianism,
yes,
has a slightly divergent piece on his Substack today, The Preposterous Premise of the Twitter Files. And he takes a look at what the Twitter Files were supposed to do.
What were they supposed to do?
Well, they were supposed to expose the deep state.
Oh, yes, right. Okay.
But in the end,
feels like it hasn't happened.
It's not happened. So on Tuesday, the Washington Post reported that the January 6th committee considered detailed evidence that tech platforms, including Twitter, quote, failed to heed their own employees' warnings about violent rhetoric and bent their rules to avoid penalizing conservatives, particularly then President Trump, out of fear of reprisals. Yes. The draft report details how most platforms didn't take dramatic steps to rein in the extremist content until after the attack on the Capitol, despite clear red flags across the internet. Some of this is that all tech fringe and mainstream platforms were exploited in tandem by right-wing activists to bring American democracy to the brink of ruin. These platforms enabled the mobilization of extremists on smaller sites and whipped up conservative grievance on larger, more mainstream ones. But in the end, committee leaders declined to delve into those topics in detail in the final report. they concentrated on Trump and the violence, that they didn't go into what tech did. They didn't go into what Republican members of Congress did. And so in that sense, it wasn't a complete report. And various and sundry, elements of those who were putting it together were upset that their issue wasn't included.
Well,
it would have been like a 10-volume set, but,
True. But,
it's worth publishing a 10-volume set, and then you get to it when you get to it.
There is that. And, of course, it left the field open, and Republicans immediately pounced, and their version of events is that, tech did too much to crack down on Republicans. They told the exact opposite story, and there was a whole volume that could have been published telling the other side of the story, or perhaps the correct interpretation of the story first, but they didn't do it.
Well, the Post reported in July that a former Twitter employee testified before the January 6th committee that Twitter considered stricter content moderation after President Trump told the Proud Boys to stand back and stand by.
Yes.
And Twitter demurred because Twitter relished in the knowledge that they were also the favorite and most used service of the former president and enjoyed having that sort of power within social media.
Yes.
If Trump had been any other user, he would have been permanently suspended a long time ago. Now, the news story is of particular interest because it essentially directly contradicts the premise of the Twitter files, the series of Twitter threads authored over the past month by Matt Taibbi and others under the aegis of Elon Musk. The Twitter files purport to show that Deep State colluded with Twitter to deplatform, shadow ban, and otherwise violate the free speech of key conservative actors, including Trump. And, of course, what I just read about they loved that Trump was there is exactly the opposite of that.
Yeah, it's a weird thing how they see the exact opposite in the same situation.
Right. Concerning the specific charges leveled against the tech platform, the evidence and reputable studies of the phenomenon show there's no evidence to support the claim that the major social media companies are suppressing, censoring, or otherwise discriminating against conservatives on their platforms. The reason I say this is because the conservative thing to do when it comes to information dissemination is to say something, and then when it's proven to be not true, you still say it, and then you say it again, and then you keep saying it, and if you keep the repetition up, eventually, the people who are tired of saying it's not true just stop talking about it. They keep going. It's the George Santos, approach to information. Just keep plowing ahead and ignore everything that everybody says and just do it.
Yeah, you're not that person. That's not your name. I don't care. I'm serving in Congress anyway.
Right.
Okay.
So, it's just there's ample evidence, he writes, for years, and in many of the branches of the national security state, broadly speaking, from the FBI to border enforcement, there's widespread sympathy, if not outright adulation for Trump. That fact alone calls into question the notion that Trump's a brave dissident fighting the deep state. And so all the deep state stuff, the more this is just one more look, is simply wrong. And in that context, I twinned that article with a piece by Ben Smith, the New York Times refugee now at Semaphore. We talked about that last week. Who has a piece called "The Billionaire Era in News is Fizzling."
The billionaire era in news.
All the billionaires like Jeff Bezos who bought papers like the Washington Post, and we're going to revamp them.
It feels
pouring
like
money to keep them going, but the business models haven't really gotten any better.
Okay.
So they're still dependent upon these billionaires, for their existence. That's sort of where you are with Musk and Twitter, because it doesn't really make enough to sustain its stuff, especially using the Elon Musk business model, which is to chase everybody away.
That's an unusual one.
Right, but not the only one. Starting a decade ago, a generation of new money billionaires rode to the rescue of American journalism. Jeff Bezos in 2013, buying the Washington Post for $250 million. Pierre Omidyar put $250 million into First Look Media, including The Intercept. Apple billionaire Lorraine Powell Steve Jobs, bought 70% of The Atlantic.
Is that right?
Biotech billionaire Patrick Soon-Shiong bought assets including the LA Times for $500 million. The founder of Salesforce, Mark Benioff, bought Time for $190 million. And the new owners promised both to support the journalism and help revolutionize business models. They have supported the journalism, but they haven't revolutionized the business models.
Yeah, well, that's a tall order, but it does tell you something about, I thought these were the America's brightest business geniuses, and they may be.
Well, that's the thing. As Ben
think
points out, to be a billionaire is to be immune from failure in any normal sense. That's exactly what you were saying. You don't know whether they're successful or not, because even though Elon Musk is a complete and total idiot, a dork, a nerd, a jerk, he's so rich that he's eccentric.
Yeah, I guess that's really it. Well,
everybody else is like, oh my God, he's terrible. He's weird. No, he's got a lot of money. Well, he's the eccentric person with the big mansion up on the hill that we only talk about in whispers.
Right.
Because he owns the town.
Yeah, I guess so. I was wondering just the other day about Bezos and the Post, and thinking, I don't remember why he said he did that. Like, what was the purpose of buying? Because
democracy dies in dark.
Yeah, right. Well, that much I saw. It was printed on there. I just wasn't clear. I guess because I learned an odd alternative explanation for the Amazon charitable giving program, Amazon Smile, which is now coming to a conclusion. They're wrapping that up and ending this program. And there was a fascinating explanation. I'll save that perhaps for second half of the show, since your time is limited. But
yeah. Well, the challenge is in part, he writes, that during the period when the billionaires emerged as white knights, alternate models had seemed hopeless, while print itself were just in ruins, if you just did it the print way, and the promise of social media was collapsing. And Ben Smith says, I was the editor-in-chief of BuzzFeed News at the time, and we dreamed of a billionaire savior as well.
I thought he dreamt that he would become the billionaire.
Yeah, but since then, distinct models have emerged. Local nonprofits have begun to serve some of those functions. State government news from Sacramento to Mississippi, seeking billionaires' money but little else. The emergence of digital subscriptions gave organizations from the Times to tiny Substacks a stable source of revenue. So bloggers basically over 15, 20 years morphed into Substack. Provided they could connect intensely with an audience. Washington proved a fruitful starting point for a new generation of companies: Politico, Axios, Punchbowl News, Semaphore.
Yeah,
survival without a billionaire requires the kind of obsessive execution and low-key panic that Benioff, Bezos, Omyadar, and Sun Ching brought to the early days of the companies. Now they own the only news organizations that aren't running scared. So it's a very different sort of feel out there. And the exception that proves or discredits the argument I'm making, he writes, is The Atlantic, which spent its way into becoming a clear rival to The New Yorker for the first time since Condé Nast was alive. Lorraine Powell-Jobs has done that by spending heavily on journalism without any particular pretense of reinventing the business of news. She's unworried The Atlantic is now losing money and excited about a side project run by her CEO, Nick Thompson, which is a Twitter rival called Narwhal.
Oh.
That'll join Spoutable, Mastodon,
there's a lot,
Post, and a whole Newsy, and a whole bunch of other stuff, I guess.
Ding Dong, Yahoo,
alternative.
I don't know. Okay.
Alt-twit.
Why not?
Anything and everything that people have found. It's very difficult to use Twitter the way I used to, because not as many people are on it. It's very difficult to use any of the other sites because not as many people are on it. And yeah, you can look at 5 different places, but you can't really have a conversation or follow a thread if it's all scattered all over the place. Although Mastodon manages to do that by having everything on different servers so that it really does not interact completely and totally. It does if you start a conversation with a single person, but you lose the perspective of all the nuance and context that, having all those other things bring into it.
Yep. It's been difficult. But, we soldier on, and maybe there'll be some breakthrough invention or purchase by some billionaire or something that will change our minds.
And to finish up, a couple of things to mention. Trump team struggles to consolidate support ahead of South Carolina event. He's going down there, but he's not coming as a conquering hero because Nikki Haley, among others, is from South Carolina, and so he's got to split.
Yes, they have a favorite daughter.
The attention from natives, including Tim Scott, who himself is thinking about running for president.
Oh boy!
And Trump isn't chasing anybody out. Now that's good for Trump because splitting the party is really the way he wins.
Yeah, that's true. If they unite behind someone else, he's in trouble. We'll wait through the The phone ringing. I like this.
Phone ringing is done. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, okay, great.
So we also have, basically it's a two-way race between Trump and DeSantis at this point. Jennifer Rubin has a piece in blocking an AP Black Studies course. DeSantis tells us who he is and writes in a tweet about rewriting history to wipe out a critical part of our American experience. That's why it's so interesting to talk about the Monterey Park experience in terms of what Monterey Park is. To deny the wrongs done to millions of Americans and to exempt institutions from the obligation to take a hard look at remedying past injustice. So we have that. Black Shia Jain, who's a data analyst, says, on the one hand, you'd expect a half-normal political party to introspect and figure out how they botched a midterm where the president's approval sat at 42% and inflation at 8% and still lost. On the other hand, you have Republicans who keep thinking that Adam Laxalt was an amazing candidate.
Yeah, well, right, true.
Right? And he says, look, Laxalt was an incredibly mediocre candidate who managed to look like a superstar because his competition was a Nazi incel, an anti-abortion nut with the CTE, who is Planned Parenthood's #1 patron, a Silicon Valley venture capitalist, a puppy-killing doctor, and a QAnon crackpot. So compared to them, he looked great.
I guess so. Right. I mean, that's all he had. He wasn't quite that crazy.
Right. So, the state of the state is that, Biden is making inroads and he has a chance to do more.
Okay. Oh, speaking of which, I guess the State of the Union coming up, I didn't even pay attention to this. But,
he's been invited and he said he'd go.
Oh, okay. Well, it's nice of them to make an invitation. I wasn't positive that they would do that. He didn't have to.
Right.
And Kevin McCarthy's kind of crazy. I'm surprised that his group didn't tell him not to. All right. You got something going on there for the rest of the day?
So
we'll check in Wednesday.
That's it for today, and we'll be back Wednesday. We'll do it again.
All right. That sounds like a good suggestion. All right. See you then.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, a.k.a. Darwin_Darko, a.k.a. the most reasonable man in America, a.k.a. KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Return now. Abandoned. Oh, I feel so alone. But okay, well, we'll hope Greg will be back with us on Wednesday and catch up on a few more things. He should do an extended segment. But this leaves us without our usual second segment with Greg. But I mentioned there were a couple of things I wanted to get to. But first, let me shoehorn in something completely different and stupid and a waste of time about the former guy. He spent his weekend. You may recall that we mentioned at some point, a week or so ago, that Diamond of Diamond and Silk had died. And, of course, there was rampant speculation on this side of the virtual aisle. There's no real aisle for us, but that she had perhaps died of complications of COVID. She was a bit of an anti-vaxxer, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think anybody ever came to any serious conclusion about that, and not that it really matters. The news story, though, is, of course, they had a memorial service for Diamond, and guess what? Silk was there, but so was Donald Trump, because reasons. And here's an interesting thing. He gave a speech at the memorial, and I guess they must have thought, well, he's the biggest name here, and we'll have him, I don't know whether they meant for him to be the grand finale or whatever, but he wasn't the first speaker. And I guess that bothered him quite a bit because they made they made a real production of this. And apparently this went on for 3+ hours. And that irritated Trump to a degree. And he made comments about it in his remarks about, they told me I'd be in and out of here in 15 minutes. This is a little longer than 15 minutes, I must say. So, sorry to inconvenience you. The other person is dead. What can I tell you? Should have been you. But just wait, hold your horses. Anyway, interesting thing. So he blabbed and said inappropriate things. That's not surprising. There are several inappropriate things. That also not surprising. And different takes on all the inappropriateness. That also not surprising. Just by way of media sampling and media observation. I'll tell you, I went to Google and Google News and, asked for what are the top stories about this thing, and it gives you the sampler of 4 stories from 4 different outlets right up at the top. This is interesting. So the Fayetteville, that's I guess Arkansas, right? Fayetteville Observer has this headline: Trump honors Diamond and Silk at Fayetteville. They were the local, I guess that's where they're from. Celebration of life. Well, nondescript. Pretty straightforward, and doesn't say anything about, maybe because they're local and maybe because she was local. I don't really know exactly what the relationship is here, but they sort of look at it I don't know. Like I say, they sort of whitewashed the local news angle on it here. Trump what the actual headline as you click through is: Trump joins family to honor Hoke County conservative activist Diamond at Fayetteville celebration of life. Okay. You might argue that they have a responsibility to do it in that way, from the local perspective. I don't know whether you would agree with that or not. Anyway, let's see. The other presentations of it were, let's see. Why is this not going back to the Google News presentation of things? It's like not letting me out of Fayetteville. There we are. So the others were the UK Independent, which maybe has a little less, at stake locally, certainly, about it. Had another interesting: Trump turns memorial for video blogger Diamond into campaign speech. That's true. And complains the service wasn't 15 minutes. Trump adds that I'll get to the rest later. But, that's true. And that was another weird and odd angle about it. Third up was the Daily Beast's take on, and their headline: Are Americans being poisoned? ? This is a quote from something. It's, in closing quotes. Diamond's memorial goes off the rails. And this is, I guess, Silk's comments at Diamond's memorial, carrying on the murdery trader Green angle on COVID, saying, the vaccine is killing everybody. People are dropping dead around here and nobody is talking about it. Silk said at her sister's celebration of life ceremony, they are dropping dead suddenly and unexpectedly. And if you're following murdery trader Green, she's doing her best to make sure that everybody believes her version of it, which is that no one has ever had cardiac incidents before the COVID-19 vaccine, and now the fact that everybody is dropping dead all over the place, and they jumped on the football injury of recent memory where nobody died, thankfully. But, saying, this is because of COVID-19 vaccine, as opposed to the guy got, hammered in the sternum. That will cause, cardiac incidents occasionally if you hit somebody hard enough. That was never a suspect for them. But yeah, so they're trying to do this. Well, people are dropping dead all over the place and nobody's asking why. Everybody's asking why, of course. And, but, normal people aren't landing on the vaccine that this person didn't take, for instance, as a suspect for this. But that was sort of an interesting angle on it. Now, the HuffPost has, I think, as the Daily Beast might. I have not read their article, but the HuffPost is sort of taking the general approach, umbrella approach to all the dumb things that happened there. Donald Trump spoils eulogy for supporter Diamond with odd remark about her sister. That's just one of a couple of odd remarks that he made. Let's see. So what do we have here? We'll read their piece. Ben Blanchett wrote this. Subheader reads, Lynette Diamond Hardaway, who popularly backed Trump along with her sister, died earlier this month at the age of 51. And the body of the story, former President Donald Trump awkwardly claimed he didn't know Silk, one half of the popular conservative duo Diamond and Silk, during a speech at her late sister Diamond's memorial service on Saturday. Yeah, that was sort of the most awkward moment of it, I guess. In his speech, he says, so I knew Diamond. She was wonderful. She was fantastic. I found out, just learned about Silk. Also, very great. Really doing a great job, becoming more and more known. It's like they were to the extent they were famous, they were a famous duo, and he's, the record is replete with their meetings. They've got video together, and he's saying, "You're so wonderful, Diamond and Silk. I love you guys. You're the best. I listen to you all the time. I just heard of her. The guy is in outer space. He always has been, but now it's just that much worse." Anyway, Lynette Diamond Hardaway, who popularly backed Trump along with her sister, died earlier this month at the age of 51 in what the former president described as a totally, and that's all the quote there is, totally, and then the rest of it is unexpected occurrence, because those are big words and he doesn't know them. Trump made an appearance at the Fayetteville, North Carolina. I don't know. I was thinking Arkansas, but I guess it's not. Is there even now? I can't even remember. I think there is. But anyway, I got the wrong Fayetteville. North Carolina service. I'm glad we stumbled across that. There's probably someone out there saying, no, you fool. It's North Carolina. Everyone knows that. And we're so, I don't know. I doubt anyone listening to the show is saying, we're so proud of Diamond and Silk here. Anyway, he made an appearance at the service. In addition to reflections on Diamond, he railed about inflation and gas prices, because he figured everybody there was there because of politics. And he listed a string of political grievances, his greatest hits, really. The former president, who visited with the duo in the White House and looped them into rallies in the past, referred to Diamond as one of the world's, quote, brightest stars, before making an odd remark about her sister. I'm serious. I thought I knew them both. I didn't. I knew Diamond, but I didn't know Silk at all. I just learned about Silk. You're fantastic, Trump said. And, of course, splashing across the screens everywhere is all three of them together talking about how well they know one another and whatever. So, that's a little odd. Trump later spoke about the crowd at the memorial service before he used his time on stage to dive into how planning went for the event. Okay. The chapel wouldn't have held the number of people that we have, Trump said, and we're doing it right, and that's the way it should be. And I did notice a very big line, very, very nice vehicles outside. That's got to be handled properly, right? So we're going to handle it properly. Go out in style. She knew that. Go out in style. He's got nothing. That's just, astounding. Anyway, so Trump went on about the length of the 3-hour plus service, and that was perhaps a little excessive, which he said was a little longer than 15 minutes. And, that's the quote that Ron Filipkowski has for it is, I can tell you one thing for sure, because he said it himself 5 times. Trump was definitely not expecting to sit through 3 hours plus of hymns and stories about Diamond's memorial service. And then his quote was, they said about 15, 20 minutes in and out. This is a little longer than 15 minutes, right? And there you go. Trump concludes his moving eulogy to Diamond by saying the 2020 election was stolen from him, and Republicans have to get a lot tougher so they can swamp the Democrats in 2024 so they can fix the country. Exactly. That may very well have been exactly what Diamond and Silk would want for their eulogy. I don't know. But there you have it. Just sort of another weird moment in TFG history. All right. Driving back into other stories that I had put aside from you, and there are many. There was, where did I put the one I was thinking of when I was talking about Amazon? Amazon Smile. I think I put this aside somewhere, but I might have to go, maybe I have to go into like Mastodon and look for, I may have bookmarked it rather than saved it. But it was a very interesting story, and I think I can explain it even as I'm looking to see if I can retrieve it so I can read it word for word, but perhaps not. But I don't know if everyone is familiar with it, but Amazon Smile was portrayed as the Amazon effort to, share the largesse, I guess, and have some sort of charitable giving program for this, for this giant company, essentially. And the basic premise of it was you could go and do your shopping at Amazon, except you had to do it at smile.amazon.com, and that becomes important later. But you would, make your purchases, and I don't think I ever ran into anything that said it wasn't eligible for Amazon Smile, but I didn't buy extremely weird things, I don't think, off of Amazon. But I guess there must have been something that occasionally wasn't available for this. But you'd buy it, and I think like 0.5% of your purchases would be donated to charities, and you could designate your favorite charity in all of this to receive this 0.5%, which I guess over time, and if you do a lot of ordering over Amazon, it builds up. And the idea, of course, is you get everybody in your organization or everyone who supports your organization to do the same. And, it adds up over the bunch of you and yada, yada. Anyway, it was always a little awkward, and, I always wondered about, well, why 0.5%? It seems like Amazon was in a position to do more. Or Jeff Bezos, I guess, is in a position to do more, but he wasn't. But it was something. And anyway, they just recently circulated a letter saying they were going to call an end to the program, explaining, well, we found that just not a lot of people really did it, and it wasn't allowing us to be effective with our philanthropy, and it was dispersing, small amounts of money among lots of different charities, but never enough to make a difference anywhere. And so we're going to revamp our charitable giving. Which everybody kind of, with Jeff Bezos and the fact that he's sitting on $150 billion or whatever, it makes you wonder, is that really what's going on here, or what? But anyway, over the weekend, and I'll look around, I'll see if I can find it. It's not that easy to find my bookmarked stuff. It's a little easier on the phone, actually. But I think somebody put up a Reddit post about it. The former Amazon folks who said, there's something you should know about the way Amazon Smile actually came into being. And it was fascinating because it made sense as an alternative explanation, which was, well, one of the things you may have noticed about it is that you had to go to smile.amazon.com to make the purchases work this way, so that there would be a registration of your having purchased it through the program, and the appropriate contribution would be made. And it was kind of a pain in the neck because, if you said to yourself, I need a new pair of sneakers from where, I don't know, whatever, who knows what people buy from Amazon. I need flour, but not until next week. So I'm going to buy it on Amazon. Or, I don't know, a book like you were supposed to be buying on Amazon originally. And you Google it, maybe it's your favorite search engine, whatever, and you land on it and oh yeah, right, Amazon has it. I'll buy it from Amazon. Right? Well, as it turns out, the way most people were landing on items for sale on Amazon was through Google or other search engines, and most typically it was Google, because that's just the overwhelming, preference for most people, the default search engine. And it still is for me, even though I know I should be using other ones for various reasons. Anyway, so lots of people were landing on Amazon purchasing pages, but they were landing there through Google. And as it turns out, because of the way, I don't know, the internet works, generally, Amazon would end up having to pay Google for all of these referrals. And I suppose they would have to pay any search engine that would do it. But they were paying outside companies a very small amount of money. But nonetheless, it would cost them something, and they would end up having to, even though they would make the sale, it was still, generally a net gain for them. So they began looking for ways to say, how can we have a fairly robust search engine here inside Amazon. It'll find you the thing. You should be able to come to Amazon first and ask that question, where can I find the item I'm looking for? Why ask Google and force us to pay them a few pennies, sure, but for the referral, why should we do it? Isn't there some way we can recapture this money so that we're not spending it on Google referrals, but instead it's all done internally? And the answer was, well, we'll give people some sort of incentive to do it, but what if you had to, in order to gain this incentive, and in this case it's the charitable contribution, what if you forced people to say, okay, I actually have to make a conscious decision to head first to Amazon and do my searching there? So they came up with this, and they basically said, instead of paying, this percentage or this few pennies to Google, we can offer at least part of that payment to people for charities instead, and then they'll come and do their searching in Amazon. So they built this kind of weird, awkward engine to say, all right, well, you got to go to smile.amazon.com in order to qualify for the charitable contribution, but that consciously moves people away from saying, okay, even if I search for something on Google and I find it and I see that it's on Amazon, I'll say, oh yeah, right, I need to first go to smile.amazon.com and then search for it again. Ah, good, there it is. Now I'll go and buy it. You have to be logged in to Amazon to make this thing work. And so it was brilliant in the sense that it did move people to change their Amazon searching behavior such that Amazon saved presumably lots of money in not having to pay Google for the referrals anymore. And they still made money because they didn't give 100% of the savings to charity. Instead, they skimmed something off the top for themselves, which is, I guess, how you get to sit on $150 billion in the end. And yeah, charity got a smattering of things. So, I don't think it's absolutely all driven necessarily by that. I don't doubt that it is, I think, probably an ineffective way to give to charity, given that you have so much money available to you. I don't know that they'll really be donating any more to charity than they were through Amazon Smile. Net, maybe, maybe not. Could be a perfectly reasonable, thing for them to do and say, all right, we'll give more concentrated amounts of money, and maybe even more, maybe less, but still more concentrated and have a bigger impact on, I don't know, a broader aspect of charities somehow. But I thought that was just sort of a brilliant thing that they sort of backhandedly came into charity by saying, well, we really are looking for a way to avoid people searching for the items on Google and then landing in Amazon. We want them to do their searching in Amazon instead. And the charitable contribution was the lure that they used to do it. I don't know if this story is true or not, but it's a brilliant interpretation of things anyway. I'll find that for you. I don't know. Note to self, except I'll forget. And if I just write down Amazon here, I'll probably think I was supposed to order something, and then I'll be racking my brain about what it was. Okay, let's see. Other stories to share with you. I guess speaking of money and the weird things that it does, let's try this one. I thought, why not start the week with more Amanda Marcotte? I guess she's becoming one of my favorites, certainly at Salon. And maybe because I see things in many times the same way that she does, or at least after she sees them, I say, I would like to have seen it that way. Whichever came first, I don't know, but I'm enjoying reading. So here's another one. The fight over big Kahn, big conservative. Ben Shapiro's beef with Steven Crowder, which I missed entirely, except I did see brief mention of it towards the end of last week, shows male insecurity is profitable. And that, I think we all agree, is fairly obvious. But apparently there was a big fight in conservative world about something, and I don't know. I guess we'll find out what it is. But more to my interest in the point is apparently, once again, another story about how if you're interested in right-wing grift, you can make a fortune if you're just willing to carry water for the right. Carry water for the left, or don't carry water, or say you don't but end up carrying it anyway. However you might describe, say, what we're doing over here. There's not nearly the amount of money available on the left-ish side of the spectrum. They have an organized program of just handing out checks for it's incredible. All right, I'll show you by reading this to you. The right is the fight is funny, but the real story is how right-wing pundits make millions appealing to the most pathetic men. That's the story Amanda wants to cover. I want to cover the fact that they are getting the money. She's covering the fact that they make money because they appeal to the most pathetic men in the world. And there are some more pathetic. There are the ones who sit here on the left and say, how come they get all the money? That's pretty pathetic too, really. But anyway, the great Achilles heel of the far right is that fascists and other stripes of authoritarians are cantankerous people. It often takes very little to get them into ugly fights with each other over stupid stuff. Witness, of course, murdery Trader Green and Lauren Boebert fighting just the other day. It often takes very little to get them into the ugly fights over stupid stuff. So perhaps it's no surprise that two of the biggest grifters in the right-wing media ecosystem, Ben, female sexual arousal is a myth, Shapiro, and I guess they're attaching their favorite quotes about them, and Stephen Marie Curie was fictional, Crowder. Wow. Well, they're in a very public, very dumb feud right now. As Nikki McCann Ramirez at Rolling Stone explains, Shapiro offered to bring the popular online show Louder with Crowder, get it? That's Steven Crowder's show, to Shapiro's Daily Wire network. Crowder, however, was offended that the contract, quote, would require him to actually make content and drive revenue for the company. Oh no. Well, welcome to work, right? He griped over contract language that reduced his payout if his show was demonetized, suspended, or removed from any major hosting and video sites. Daily Beast reporter Justin Baragona added, noting that Crowder has a history of gleefully spewing homophobic, racial, and misogynistic slurs on his program, prompting YouTube to repeatedly pull advertisements and demonetize his content on the platform. By the way, the key word I think in that sentence was repeatedly, which means that they keep reinstating him and then he does it again. I don't know why they reinstate him. Keep in mind, we are not monetized by YouTube. We're just not, interesting enough to them to do. The few interactions we've had with YouTube is we've said, listen to how dumb this terrible anti-vaxxer person is. And then they say, we're pulling your episode because you mentioned anti-vaxxer material. And in the meantime, they're giving money to this guy who says Marie Curie was fictional. All right. Crowder, for those who are lucky enough to have never heard his name, and that probably includes a lot of you, rose to fame by being especially cringeworthy in the crowded field of professional right-wing trolling. He plays heavily into the stereotype of the loudmouth ignoramus who spouts off in class about how slavery wasn't so bad, or corners women at the bar to rave about how their entire sex is insufficiently grateful to men. He is, quite literally, the dude in that debate me bro meme. Okay. Well, at any rate, let's see. Is that when he says quite literally the dude in the debate me bro meme? I didn't realize that. I guess that's actually Steven Crowder. He's in the change my mind meme that I use, or I use somebody else's photoshopping of it, the one that says every Republican accusation is a confession, change my mind. But I guess the original, maybe it is actually him? Wow, I didn't even realize that. But yeah, Louder with Crowder is on the mug that he's holding. Huh, that's amazing. So the original one, I guess, I don't know. I don't know if this is an original one. It's not. But I guess the point is, it's him. Right. The original photo, it says, came from a stunt where he set up shop on a campus with a sign that read, "Male privilege is a myth," in hopes of baiting teenage girls into arguing with him. Because he likes teenage girls, I guess. That sums up Crowder's shtick. He appeals to dudes who are so pathetic that they resort to politicized catcalling in order to garner female attention. Once again, we are looking at what I've deemed the male insecurity to fascism pipeline, where right-wing grifters appeal to men by suggesting the cure for self-doubt is turning yourself into a massive a-hole. And that's really the greatest summation I think I've ever seen of this whole phenomenon. Once recruited into the toxic masculinity cult, of course, their audiences are directed toward far-right politics. Becoming a fully formed fascist is the final stage in the life cycle of a right-wing troll. The fight between Shapiro and Crowder is very funny, of course, making any Real Housewives slap fight look like the Battle of Algiers by comparison. At stake appears to be a standard issue far-right dispute, which can be summed up as, should we use racial slurs or just imply them? Shapiro is team imply, correctly understanding that helps one evade the social media censors, allowing fascistic content further reach. Crowder, however, feels that kind of restriction is harshing his vibe. His principled commitment to sucking cannot be bought for a mere $50 million. And that's really the reason I'm here today. No, you did not read that number wrong. You didn't hear that number wrong. Shapiro really did offer Crowder a cool $50 million. $50 million to bring his get girls' attention by telling them to make you a sandwich act to the Daily Wire. Clearly, the world of exploiting deeply insecure men is quite a lucrative grift, and to think of how many men have never charged a penny for a must-be Shark Week retort when a woman takes issue over a stranger pinching her butt. I mean, that's essentially where we are in all this. By the way, $50 million. If somebody had offered me $50,000, I'd be astonished by all this. Imagine $50 million and then turning your nose up. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Vastly less than $50 million involved in this program. I must say, I'll continue on where Amanda, where she goes next. Where I left off, she was saying that number, $50 million, was so big that even I took pause. And I mean, really, $10 million would have made me take pause. $1 million would have made me take pause. So, you can be excused for that. And she says, I never underestimate how much cash you can squeeze out of, let's say, dumbasses who just want to blame their personal failures on feminism. Take, for instance, and why don't you, Jordan Peterson, who has overcome a creepy personal visage and voice that sounds like a Muppet, simply with incoherent ramblings about how feminism supposedly suppresses the virility of modern men. Or the recently jailed accused rapist Andrew Tate, who racked up billions of views on TikTok for videos peddling tired tropes about how women who have opinions should be met with beatings. Or Shapiro himself, whose self-confident declaration that a lubricating vagina is diseased. Hi, everybody. Good morning. How you doing? Is hilariously false anyway, but has a certain appeal to those bitter over their lack of personal experience with sexually aroused women. Yeah, I think that was, I think everybody has heard that one about Ben Shapiro, but if not, I don't know what to tell you. Look it up. Follow the links if you like. Anyway, as that last example shows, there's one important thing to understand about these masculinity grifters. Their advice, quote unquote advice, makes the problems bedeviling their audiences worse. So much of what drives men to listen to the Crowders, Petersons, and Tates of the world is their romantic, social, and professional frustrations and disappointments. But the model of behavior they're given, to act like pompous, overbearing, or even violent jerks is a fast track to even more rejection on the dating market, in the workplace, and even when trying to find friends. The cynical and likely accurate view is that is very much by design. Right-wing grifters don't want their audiences to experience personal growth and improved lives. If their followers actually found love or meaningful employment or supportive friends, then they wouldn't have holes in their hearts that they tried to fill with Daily Wire content. Like any cult, the toxic masculinity racket requires keeping its people in perpetual state of insecurity and therefore emotionally dependent on their leaders. Journalist Andy Campbell pointed this out to me when discussing his book about the Proud Boys. The group, Campbell explained, draws men in by promising to teach them how to attract women, but in reality, once they're in, the group actively prevents them from becoming, or rather from forming, meaningful attachments to women. Clearly, male insecurity is quite a natural resource. If only it could be mined for real energy to power cars and electric lights. Alas, the only thing it's good for is lining the pockets of con artists and creating political momentum for fascist movements. Crowder and Shapiro may very well end up working together, and there's a strong whiff of wrestling ring fakery to their public beefing, or maybe they'll go their separate ways. Either way, both are set up to make an unbelievable amount of money because there's a never-ending supply of deeply insecure men who want to believe toxic masculinity will save them. And it is quite astonishing. I mean, honestly, can you imagine being offered $50 million to take your program, or this program, anywhere? It's rather astonishing, and it does literally make you wonder, what in the hell are we even doing here? Like, what's the point of discussing things as normal people when there's $10 in it versus, well, what if I just make myself a cartoon and just say the dumbest possible answer to everything, and then they just keep throwing more and more money at you? It's hard to believe that anybody does anything else, really, except that, maybe just economics doesn't motivate everybody. Not in the same way, anyhow. Okay, it's crazy out there. Other things to bring to your attention that might be of some interest. Speaking as we were of the former guy recently and his weirdo bunch of lunatics that hang on. Oh, yeah, by the way, LOL GOP had a great line over the weekend over the Diamond and Silk thing. Just, showing this weird moment where he says, oh, I don't know, I just found out about Silk. I didn't know who she was, but now she's terrific. But just pointing that whole situation out. And his line on it was, former presidents of the United States should not have a whack pack, which a reference to like the Howard Stern show crew of the weirdos and various, associates and hangers-on to the show who have their own oddities about them, I guess, but who collectively, I guess, are referred to that way. But man, it is odd, the number of people who have that just strange, tenuous, grifting relationship with Trump. But speaking of Trump and grifting, Rolling Stone has an interesting story here. I'm going to have to read you the pocket version of it, though. Let me make sure I got the credits right. Yeah, Asuin Subsang and Adam Rawnsley on this piece titled, curiously enough, Trump looks to ditch his own social media site. I mean, he's got to be, aware by now that Truth Social just isn't the thing. He uses it for his own platform, whatever. And when he was reinstated on Twitter, there was some question, oh, well, will he go back to Twitter? That's where he really wants to be. But he's trying to promote his own social network and build up his own thing, so he'll stick to that. But I think a better explanation of it, it seems, from this Rolling Stone article is he's contractually obligated to stay with Truth Social, at least for some period of time, and that period of time may be coming to an end, after which you'll see where his real motivations lie. In the months ahead of what's likely to be a brutal Republican presidential primary, Donald Trump and his 2024 campaign are laying the groundwork for his big, bombastic return to major social media platforms. By the way, I did see, as we were discussing the other day with Greg, I think, the idea of, the contest for RNC chair, Ronna Romney, McDaniel versus the various other challengers, and that Trump may be attempting to back his favorite candidate and maybe back McDaniel on this, in the hopes that he can engineer. I mean, I don't know why he would think he could engineer this, even if he were still vastly popular, but trying to engineer a nomination by either by like acclamation or at a convention or by some fashion other than having primaries in each of the states, which he's convinced, there will be several that it would become embarrassing losses for him, even if he did eventually win the nomination. Like, how do I compete in Florida with Ron DeSantis and the DeSantis machine there? And I don't know how much truth there is to that speculation, but I just thought I'd throw it out there. If that develops into a story over the next couple of months, then we'll all be able to say, okay, I'm aware of that. So anyway, back to the story here from Rolling Stone. Let's see. He's preparing for his return to major social media platforms. Such a return, though, would inevitably involve Trump screwing over one of his own companies, sort of, kind of. He's not really doing anything. He's just collecting from them. And he's been telling confidants that he's prepared to do just that because of the nature of this relationship, I think. When Trump first founded Trump Media and Technology Group, or TMTG, he agreed to a social media exclusivity term that required him to first channel any and all social media communications to his Truth Social account for 6 hours before posting the content to other platforms, according to SEC filings. Since late last year, former President Trump has informed several people close to him that he doesn't want to re-up the exclusivity agreement with his social media company, Truth Social, of course. Two sources familiar with the matter tell Rolling Stone. There's not going to be a need for that, is how one of the sources recalls Trump describing his soon-to-expire contractual obligation. That doesn't answer any questions. He's just saying that there's not going to be a need for that. Why wouldn't there be a need for that? We need you to put Truth Social first if we're going to survive, if we ever have any hope of competing with other social media platforms. You're not going to need that. You're not going to need that. Why not? Explain why not. I don't have to explain anything. You're just not going to need it. All right, well, sure. The 18-month term of that requirement is up in June, right as the Republican primary is expected to begin heating up. After that, Trump's exclusivity term would automatically renew for 6-month periods unless notice is given. In the event that his exclusivity term expires, Trump would still be, quote, required to post contemporaneously to Truth Social. He said there's an expiration date and he didn't want to make commitments, the other source said. Asked whether Trump planned to continue to make Truth Social his exclusive social media home, a company representative directed Rolling Stone to a recent appearance by TMTG CEO Devin Nunes on Newsmax, where the former California congressman said Trump, quote, has no interest in going back to Twitter. Others, of course, disagree. One person close to Trump who has spoken to the ex-president recently about Twitter tells Rolling Stone on Sunday there is no way Nunes' statement is true. That's pretty blunt. Regardless of what happens with his exclusivity term, Trump's agreement with the company grants him greater freedom in campaigning for his upcoming 2024 run. His agreement exempts posts as long as the content, quote, specifically relates to political messaging, political fundraising, or get out the vote efforts, according to SEC filings. The recent accounts of Trump's growing restlessness with his own platform come at a time when the former president, once exiled from mainstream social media for instigating a deadly insurrection, could return to some of those platforms. Twitter, now owned by right-wing billionaire Elon Musk, reinstated Trump's account in November, but Trump demurred and said he'd stay with Truth Social to keep collecting the payments, of course. The Trump campaign also pressed Facebook to end the indefinite suspension of his account put in place after the January 6th Capitol attack. A Meta spokesperson referred Rolling Stone to its statement made before the Trump campaign's demand for reinstatement, which said the company would make a decision in the coming weeks in line with the process we laid out. The statement, made in early January, suggests that a decision about the account could be announced relatively soon. Meta's independent oversight board upheld the company's decision to restrict his account in a May 2021 ruling, but called the undefined period of suspension it gave Trump arbitrary. The company's rules call for time-bound or permanent suspensions for severe violations and asked officials to reassess it. If Meta officials reinstate his account, Trump will face a moderation process with new and potentially stricter reviewers involved than the environment he faced during his presidency. Previously, users could only appeal the company's decisions to remove content, but the board's jurisdiction expanded in April of 2021 to allow third parties to appeal content which they think should be removed from Facebook or Instagram. If Trump returns to Facebook, his posts could face a second layer of scrutiny from the Independent Oversight Board, which may feel freer to enforce the company's rules against the Republican presidential favorite. And as NBC News reported on Wednesday, Trump has begun to ask associates for their thoughts about a return to Twitter and suggestion for a first tweet. People with knowledge of the matter tell Rolling Stone that some of the ideas that Trump has personally discussed include a tweet that features a slickly made WWE-style campaign video about the ex-president returning to the platform and then to the White House. One of these sources says Trump has privately rattled off possible topics in recent weeks for his initial barrage of new tweets, such as ones focused on insulting President Joe Biden, or others comparing himself to Superman. Sounds like typical fare. Other ideas, however, have included picking at the scabs of the January 6th attack. According to one source familiar with the matter, Trump and some of his close allies have already brainstormed about him tweeting that even though big tech tried to silence him over his lies about a rigged election, he was now back to make the left miserable. And that's also par for the course when it comes to Trumpism, of course. So anyway, that out there as a possibility. There's a lot of Trump-related news, I think, that we probably will wind up with today. Let me add this one as well, just so that you know this is actually happening. Philip Bump at the Washington Post summarizing something we haven't talked about yet, a raft of sanctions handed down against Trump and his lawyers in one of their myriad frivolous lawsuits around the country. A judge rebukes and punishes Trump's false Russia narrative. I guess the first time that it's really faced a real consequence of substance here. Conspiratorial political rhetoric exists as though it is written on ancient Egyptian papyrus. Within controlled environments, this is what does that mean? Well, within controlled environments, the right temperature, the proper humidity, etc., it can inspire and persuade indefinitely. But remove it from these protections, expose it to harsh light or less gentle handling, and it crumbles. Donald Trump has helped to build one of the world's largest repositories of false political rhetoric and misleading claims, assertions that exist within the capacious, controlled confines of right-wing news outlets and social media. And the centerpiece of his collection has long been his delicately structured rebuttal to Russia's efforts to swing the 2016 presidential election on his behalf. He and his friends have taken bits of papyrus from various places and carefully assembled a document that they purport depicts the real history of the past 7 years. They're quite proud of it. But then Trump went and took it out of its protective case and brought it to a courthouse. It crumbled, or really, it was picked apart fiber by fiber, and this week, U.S. District Judge Donald M. Middlebrooks levied a fine of nearly $1 million against Trump and his attorney, Alina Habba, for bringing it to him in the first place. This argument that Trump presented, detailed in an expansive lawsuit filed against Hillary Clinton, former government officials, and others, is very on brand, given that it was a pastiche of the narrative that he and his allies were noodling over at the time it was submitted, whatever was rattling around in their idiot heads, right? This has long been Trump's approach to this stuff. Elevate whatever hasn't been debunked yet, and the stuff that his supporters don't care had already been debunked. But again, that only works in a climate-controlled environment. So, when Trump and his attorneys tried to argue that Clinton had triggered the Russia investigation, they were largely leveraging the then ongoing investigation by special counsel John Durham. That investigation was not a success, but Trump was stuck with it. In September, Middlebrooks made the deficiencies of this approach very obvious, littering the ground with papyrus. Now Middlebrooks has determined that the egregious deficiencies of the argument, the public presentations by Trump and his team that the argument was robust, and more importantly, Trump's pattern of frivolous lawsuits that went unpunished, should yield an actual penalty. Finally, thank God, right? But still not enough. A continuing pattern of misuse of the courts by Mr. Trump and his lawyers, Middlebrooks wrote when he issued those sanctions, undermines the rule of law, portrays judges as partisans, and diverts resources from those who have suffered actual legal harm. Here, we are confronted with a lawsuit that should never have been filed, which was completely frivolous, both factually and legally, and which was brought in bad faith for an improper purpose, he adds later. Mr. Trump is a prolific and sophisticated litigant who is repeatedly using the courts to seek revenge on political adversaries. He is the mastermind of strategic abuse of the judicial process, and he cannot be seen as a litigant blindly following the advice of a lawyer. He knew full well the impact of his actions. Middlebrooks described the nature of the lawsuit, a shotgun pleading, loosely aimed at a number of targets, as amounting to obstruction of justice. He described having sifted through the thread of allegations against each defendant, only to find that they added up to no cognizable claim, and the pleadings were drafted in a way to disguise that fact. He noted that Trump and his attorneys consistently misrepresented and cherry-picked portions of public reports and filings to support a false factual narrative, something very familiar, even to non-legal observers. To demonstrate the flimsiness of one of those threads of allegations, Middlebrooks walks through Trump's claims about former FBI Director James B. Comey, who, the initial lawsuit alleges, was somehow involved with Clinton in trying to get the Russia probe off the ground. Over the course of 4 pages, he presents the quote-unquote case against Comey, making its inconsistencies and superficialities obvious. Even the amended version of Trump's lawsuit, he writes, is a hodgepodge of disconnected, often immaterial events, followed by an implausible conclusion. This is a deliberate attempt to harass, to tell a story without regard to facts. Each of Trump's favorite allegations about the unfairness of the Russia probe is dispatched with Trump's assessment that the conclusions of Special Counsel Robert S. Mueller III exonerated him. Middlebrooks wrote, is perhaps acceptable as a cable news talking point, but is neither an accurate nor fair reading of the Mueller report. A similar conclusion is reached for the dossier of allegations against Trump for the Durham indictments, which failed to obtain guilty verdicts, and for Trump's looping in his suspension from Twitter. The assertion that the Twitter ban was caused by misinformation by Ms. Clinton 5 years earlier is plainly false, Middlebrooks writes with understatement. None of this alone would necessarily have led to Trump and Haba being sanctioned. You would think so, but, bottom line is it's a very rare thing for the judges to go ahead with sanctions. But Middlebrooks noted that this suit was one of several with similar aims, bolstering Trump's arguments, whipping up attention, and spurring contributions. Lawsuits against CNN, against Twitter, against New York Attorney General Letitia James, even against the board that presents the Pulitzer Prize. In these, Middlebrooks saw the same pattern. Provocative and boastful rhetoric, a political narrative carried over from rallies, attacks on political opponents and the news media, disregard for legal principles and precedent, and fundraising and payments to lawyers from political action committees. This widespread and persistent conduct points to the need for deterrence, he concluded, and the form that deterrence would take was a penalty of $937,989.39, applied to both Trump and Haba. Should have kept the theory in a protective case, or, not cobbled it together in the first place. Well, that's the only conclusion you can draw. Now, I don't know whether they will ever get that money. I don't know whether, I'm sure that they'll appeal and appeal and appeal as many times as they can, and probably only thereby build up the amount that they'll eventually have to pay. But I guess Trump will also laugh it off as a pittance versus the billions of dollars that he's getting from elsewhere or that he already has. But yeah, the deterrence could have been perhaps a little stronger, but the language was certainly about as strong as you can get ordinarily from a sitting judge. Okay, let's see. Other things let's see. What do we have time for before breaks, and what else do we not? How about, let's see. We'd have to jump off of the topic here. Why don't we continue with the topic and see if we can fit this story in? Our source here is not one that I'm all that familiar with, although I can't say for sure whether we've been here before or not. The Psy Post, P-S-Y, Psy Post, like mental health, psychiatry, psychology. The PsyPost.org has this not necessarily intriguing, but I think it confirms our priors, which is why it's made it to the show. We'll be honest about that. New study indicates Republicans revised their moral beliefs to be more in alignment with Donald Trump. Eric W. Dolan writes here for the Psy Post. Confirming what we mostly suspected about them, but putting it in possibly in clinical terms. Let's take a look. A study, so why not? New research sheds light on how people resolve inconsistencies between their own moral views and that of their preferred candidate. The findings, published in Political Psychology, the journal, I guess, suggest that U.S. voters on both sides of the political aisle tend to revise their perceptions of political leaders they support to align with their own moral beliefs. Maybe, sure. But I guess they say it perhaps happens slightly differently on one side versus the other. The study, which examined the 2016 U.S. presidential election, also found that Republicans, but not Democrats, what happened to both sides, appeared to revise their own moral beliefs to reduce incongruities with Donald Trump. Oh, I see. Okay. Well, that makes sense. Democrats obviously weren't going to revise their moral beliefs to reduce incongruities with Donald Trump. They're going to exaggerate them. A lot of work in political science research shows how voters are often followers, adjusting their views on issues to match the messages they get from their party's leaders. We wanted to see if that pattern extended to moral beliefs as well, as morality is usually assumed to be more stable and thus exerting a causal influence on political preferences such as candidate choice, explained study authors William Kidd and Joseph A. Vitriol. Is that right? Is it Vitriol? That's a bit of a matrix glitch for you. Anyway, you could see this assumption play out in the 2016 campaign, where both the media and the Clinton campaign treated Republican votes as gettable due to differences between the typical Republican positions on moral issues and what positions Trump held. However, we expected voters would be motivated to resolve those differences in some way, either adjusting their own views or how they viewed the candidates in order to justify their original decision of which candidate to support. The researchers analyzed data from a 4-wave study of the 2016 presidential election by the Center for the Study of Political Psychology at the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities. The study recruited an initial sample of 3,557 U.S. citizens and surveyed their attitudes in July, September, October, and November of 2016. During this first wave of the study, the participants completed an assessment of their moral foundations. Sounds like tough work. During the second wave, they were randomly assigned to report their perceptions of the moral foundations of either Clinton or Trump. During the third wave, both measures of moral foundations were repeated. And finally, during the fourth wave, the participants indicated their actual vote choice. The researchers found evidence that participants projected their own moral foundations onto their preferred candidate. That's probably true. Among Trump supporters, self-reported moral foundations during Wave 1 predicted perceptions of Trump's foundations during Wave 2. A similar pattern was observed among Clinton supporters. Trump supporters appeared to adjust their moral foundations to align more closely with their perceptions of Trump's moral foundations. Perceptions of Trump at Wave 2 changed how his supporters perceived their own moral beliefs at Wave 3. Well, we'll return to this after this break. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Net Roots Radio. We'll continue a little bit with this Psy Post story. We left off in the middle of the paragraph because we were running out of time, but essentially we found, or we heard that they found, the researchers found, that Trump supporters appeared to adjust their moral foundations to align more closely with their perceptions of Trump's moral foundations, which is, by the way, an impossible thing to align yourself with. I don't think there are moral foundations, per se, for Donald Trump. But, clearly, people who were, bedrock Republicans before, who stayed Republicans during, and didn't turn into never Trumpers, would have to have done that. I mean, in order to say that you're a rock-ribbed Republican, character matters and yada yada. This is the sort of thing that they said when they had to compete against Bill Clinton, who was under attack, rightly or wrongly, and it kind of sounds like rightly, that he was a bit of a wandering guy, a bit of a wandering eye on and everything else on him, a philanderer, as his political opponents said, then this is clearly the kind of person, well, we can't have that, character matters, et cetera, et cetera. Now Donald Trump is your nominee and he's got the same thing and worse. And all of a sudden it's like, well, no, that doesn't really matter. And in fact, it owns the libs to say that it doesn't matter, because they say, but how could you possibly believe that given what you said about Bill Clinton? And the answer is either I don't care, or shut up, go away, or go straight at it and say, no, we are doing this to bother you more than anything else. But they clearly are changing something. They couldn't possibly, you can't reconcile Reaganism, that sort of approach to campaign politics and acceptance of Donald Trump. I mean, the policy may be the same underlying it, but the campaign politics are very different. Anyway, so they note that essentially they are adjusting their ideals. However, this same experiment revealed that this pattern was not found among Clinton supporters who did not adjust their own moral beliefs. Political leadership is moral leadership, the researchers told SciPost. Many voters revise even their fundamental views of what they describe as right and wrong based on their perceptions of the candidate they support. Ideas and positions that might have seemed out of bounds can become normalized very quickly if they receive support from political leaders. Yeah, in a number of ways, right? That voters adjust their perceptions of the candidates is also a likely reason partisan conflict often seems so intractable, as voters from each party may not even share a common understanding of the candidates in question, limiting any form of reasoned debate. The researchers controlled for race, gender, age, education, income, political knowledge, partisan identification, and political ideology. But as with all research, the study includes some caveats. It's hard to determine if the differences we find between Clinton and Trump supporters are due to differences between Democrats and Republicans more broadly, or if the results reflect unique qualities of those particular candidates. Kidd and Vitriol explained. We've found evidence in our follow-up work in the 2020 election for both possibilities, with Biden supporters seeming to show a bit more congruence and self-candidate moral beliefs than Clinton supporters did, but still less than the Trump supporters show. We're also looking at what could explain those differences, they added. Is it due to the differing media landscapes each side consumes? How they connect their sense of morality to voting? We also want to better understand the consequences of these processes for how voters view politics and how they act on those views. Our follow-up work seems to show higher levels of congruence, predict more polarized evaluations of political actors among Biden supporters, and increased political engagement and anti-democratic attitudes among Trump supporters. That's a dangerous combination. Increased political engagement, but anti-democratic attitudes as well. The desire to achieve congruence between one's own beliefs and what people perceive their party as believing is likely to contribute to the polarization in U.S. politics and may have even more severe consequences when people feel threatened by political events or processes, Kidd and Vitriol concluded. The study, Moral Leadership in the 2016 U.S. Presidential Election, was published on September 27th, 2021. So it's been quite a while. So they're, I guess, doing a new publicity round for it. I suppose that's got to have something to do with it in order for it to make it to my desk again, unless this is actually, no, I mean, it's a current, oh, no, it isn't a current article. January 30th, but unless the date is wrong, it reads January 30th, 2022. So it must have come to my attention through social media, somebody using it to, prove a basic point about the differences between Democrats and Republicans. And, it's a good point and it's a good relevant one. It actually made me think of the George Santos situation. Maybe because we're missing him from the news and there are no new crazy revelations about him today. But I guess the latest round of them about his having been a drag performer, for instance, really highlighted everything for me. Like, you've gone all in, Republicans have, on accusing drag performers of being, truly evil people. And then you find out that this guy who's already causing you tremendous problems and who you should want to jettison for any number of reasons, but who's crucial to hanging on to your majority in the House, has a background as a drag performer. And you're just like, that's okay. I mean, people make exceptions for people that they need to hold on to alliances with for whatever reasons, even whether they like it or not, whether they believe it or not. So, it doesn't surprise me. I just thought that it had a relevance to the context that we're working in today. So I thought I'd add it to the mix. All right, let's see other things that deserve mention here. Let's see. Oh, okay, this is some of these things that need to be clicked on in Pocket to discover exactly what they were. Let's see. How about returning briefly, at least, to the debt? Well, I don't want to. I did read somebody saying we should be reframing the way we discuss the debt ceiling issue, but I don't think I quite grasped how they wanted to redo it. But at any rate, we'll get back to that issue. And the $1 trillion coin scheme, some further exploration of how it came to be in the sort of fascinating story that we discovered at the end of last week about it being attributable to one or some small group of bloggers who put the scheme together and popularized it at the time. And I'll read this story from Vox on that issue. And I'm fascinated by it because it does remind me a little bit of how bloggers essentially convinced and reminded / reprogrammed, I guess, convinced senators to understand or admit to themselves that they had the power to change the rules by simple majority vote back in the day when it was all about filibuster reform. And it, still largely is for us, but this was worked very much against the orthodoxy, and it took a lot of work to persuade people that the opposite was the actual truth, and we had to change the mindset not only of the political press, but of the people pressuring their representatives, and then of the senators themselves. Even though I always suspected underneath many of them knew inherently that they did have this power, they didn't want to admit it, and they could continue to claim that they didn't have it so long as both the majority of the public and press didn't understand the opposite to be the case. But anyway, just more, I thought of it as a parallel to this $1 trillion coin scheme, as it calls it here in the headline in Vox, just in terms of it being something that came up through the blogs and grassroots, and they undertook a campaign to change minds about it after a while, and to convince people that the impossible was in fact perfectly plausible after all. So the $1 trillion coin scheme explained by the guy who invented it. This is a Dylan Matthews piece for Vox. The subheader here: let us now praise Beowulf, perhaps the most influential blog commentator, I was going to say commentator, but blog commenter of all time. Ooh, that's a lofty title. On Tuesday, the Treasury Secretary of the United States, Janet Yellen, finally said it. She does not intend to mint a platinum coin worth $1 trillion to pay for the U.S. government's expenses. If you are not familiar with the platinum coin idea, and that's impossible now for us, or the hashtag mint the coin, or the small army of coinistas who have become a vocal part of economics and finance circles since the early 2010s, you may be asking, what the hell are you talking about? The sorta short answer is that later this month, the U.S. will exceed the legal limit on how much outstanding debt the federal government can hold. That's the debt ceiling. This is, of course, dated October 7th of 2021. So I guess we already had extraordinary measures in place that stretched things out. At any rate, here, this is 2021 rather than 2022. Did we do the debt ceiling in 2021? I don't even recall that we actually, I don't know how many times we've raised it, because it's ordinarily an inconsequential thing and routine, and for decades it was exactly that, and it went without notice. It should go without notice. But at any rate, this is now relevant all over again as we find ourselves back here, because they keep, not only we have to keep raising the debt ceiling, but they're afraid to raise the number to some figure where they wouldn't have to deal with this for several years at a time anymore, because they're afraid that people will point and say, look at how much money something, even though there's no money spent by a raise in the debt ceiling. Anyway, So back in 2021, they were dealing with this. Right. Saying the short answer is that later that month, October of 2021, the U.S. will exceed the legal limit on how much outstanding debt the federal government can hold. That's the debt ceiling. Senate Republicans have agreed to allow an extension through December, but that just sets up another confrontation in a few months. And here we are. To avert the global economic catastrophe that might ensue if the U.S. exceeds the debt limit, some observers have broached some truly absurd ideas. Enter mint the coin. A 1997 law, you heard about this when we read the Wikipedia article, intended to help the mint make money off of coin collectors, gives the Treasury Secretary the power to mint platinum coins of any denomination for any reason. When commentators discovered this law during the 2011 and 2013 debt ceiling battles, they realized that this power could offer a way to sidestep the legal cap Congress places on federal government borrowing. Instead of issuing a new debt and running afoul of the debt ceiling, the Treasury Secretary could simply fund the government by minting platinum coins. In 2013, even former U.S. Mint Director Philip Deal agreed it would work. And over the years, influential voices like financial journalist Joe Wiesenthal and New York Times columnist Paul Krugman have also promoted the idea. But all these people did not simply stumble upon this law. It was brought to their attention by Beowulf, a blog commenter and reply guy, better known as Atlanta area attorney Carlos Mucha. I think he's probably better known as Beowulf. Mucha conceived of the idea in a short comment on financier Warren Mosler's blog posted on May 24, 2010 at 8:29 p.m. It's important to know exactly what time. In which he said, curiously enough, Congress has already delegated to Treasury all the seigniorage power authority it needs to mint a $1 trillion coin. Even numismatic coins are legal tender at their face value and must be accepted by the Federal Reserve. The catch is, it's got to be made of platinum. Ditto the balls of any president who tried this. And hey, come on. Boy, that's sexist. Anyway, so for a 1 ounce coin, Treasury would only net $999.998 billion because you'd need an ounce of platinum to do it. I get you. From this modest post, a $1 trillion idea sprouted. One that has come to influence fiscal policy discussions in the U.S. at the highest levels. I reached out to Carlos Mucha on his natural sparring grounds, Twitter. I wonder if that's still the case. And we talked a bit via direct message about how he started the mint the coin craze, how it got the attention of policymakers, and how to get out of the current debt ceiling crisis. Our DM conversation, edited for length and clarity, follows. Shall we read through this? Just get some idea about this. Tell me the basic story, he says, of the $1 trillion coin idea. How did it go from you posting it on a blog comment thread to being something the president and his advisors talk about? I mean, that is kind of interesting, right? Carlos says, the idea developed on the forum of Warren Mosler's website in 2010. Warren is a founder of modern monetary theory, which is quite popular among progressives these days. Modern monetary theory, or MMT, as it is explained here, is a heterodox school of economics that argues that concerns about the national debt are often overblown. Anyway, the crowd was brainstorming. That's a simplistic view, but okay. They're trying to get to something else here. Anyway, the crowd was brainstorming on how to avoid a default if Congress didn't lift the debt ceiling, and I came across this platinum coin subsection K of the Coinage Act. I blogged about it a bit back then, and it was picked up on by other bloggers and then journalists, and it just snowballed from there. Naomi Klein's Shock Doctrine book describes how conservatives in this country and abroad use a crisis, natural disasters and other unexpected calamities, to push through policies that would never win legislative support. I mean, otherwise, I guess. What happened was, in the Obama administration, his Republican adversaries realized they could actually plan a crisis by refusing to increase the debt ceiling and then use the shock doctrine to push through their desired policy. That would be spending cuts, and if they could get away with it, tax cuts too. Here's the thing. Republicans know that by and large, Dick Cheney was right. Deficits don't matter. Reagan taught us that. It's possible that Reagan didn't teach Cheney, but rather that Cheney's best friend in the D.C. power circle, It's possible that Reagan didn't teach Cheney that, but rather Cheney's best friend in the D.C. power circle, Don Rumsfeld, that deficits don't matter. And where did Rumsfeld learn this? Warren Mosler. Mosler has said he devised MMT after a discussion with Rumsfeld in the steam room of the Racket Club in Chicago. That's R-A-C-Q-U-E-T, not R-A-C-K, Racket Club, but much the same thing as it turns out. So Republicans know deficit and debt fears are overblown, but Democrats do not. So we see Carter, Clinton, and Obama clean up the balance sheet and enable Reagan, Bush, and Trump to come in and cut taxes. Progressives have now caught on to the game, which is why the $1 trillion coin and big spending plans of Bernie Sanders and AOC, it says here parenthetically, resonate with the Democratic base. Anyway, that's what I think is going on. And Dylan Matthews returns with another question. How do you get interested in Warren Mosler and his forum? What made that a preferred place for you to post? Carlos says, I don't even remember how I landed at Warren's site, but he's a genuinely cool guy and is always ready to engage with readers on his board. It helped that he was simpatico with two economists that I was already a fan of, William Vickery, who had introduced Warren to the other post-Keynesian economists, Bill Mitchell and Randy Wray, that helped develop MMT, and Jamie Galbraith, who wrote the foreword to one of Warren's books, who'd later quietly plugged the $1 trillion coin idea to other economists. I suspect Jamie is the proximate cause of Paul Krugman endorsing it. Matthews then asks, and from there it was a pretty short walk to people like Jerry Nadler promoting it and the White House having to formally comment. It's a mainstream idea now. What was it like to watch the idea take off like this? Bewildering? Embarrassing? Entirely positive? Carlos says, yes, entirely positive. I have had clients seek me out and hire me because of it. So it's been nice to be able to, monetize the idea. The best part was getting an email from Phil Deal, the former Mint director who actually drafted the platinum coin law that Congress enacted in 1997. And when he said, yes, this will work, I suddenly felt like Rodney Dangerfield in Back to School. He has a Kurt Vonnegut paper due, so he naturally hires Kurt Vonnegut to write it. It's hilarious. It was basically an intellectual exercise, like a website where people hash out who the greatest third baseman of all time was or whatever, and it just took off. Dylan then says, have you had any politicians or Treasury or Fed officials reach out to ask you about the coin? Sure. Sometimes someone in the administration, Congress, or the Fed will drop me a line asking for my take on some problem or another. If you'd asked me yesterday, I would have said that that was because of the $1 trillion coin story. But after receiving this text yesterday, and it's enclosed here or embedded here, I'm not so sure anymore. Maybe public officials secretly canvass all the Twitter reply guys for policy advice. Who knows what's happening here? Let's see. Also was listening to Odd Lots. Are you the creator of the minting the coin idea? Wait, what? I thought you knew that. I didn't put two and two together. You are a legend. You should join us at the Gov as Creative Legal Solutions Czar. You would be redacted, actually. You would be something. I guess maybe inappropriate for, anyway, yes, the Twitter reply guy is also the mint the coin reply guy. Very interesting. I never got texts, by the way, to come in and fix the Senate, but, I wasn't available for that anyway. Dylan returns with another round of questions here. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen recently seemed to close the door on the coin, telling CNBC, I'm opposed to it, and I don't think we should consider it seriously. It's really a gimmick. It compromises the independence of the Fed, conflating monetary and fiscal policy. She also argued that it would fail to reassure markets, thereby creating some risks akin to those of a debt ceiling breach. What do you make of her comments? Well, she is by and large very good at her job and is by all accounts a nice person, but on this she's wrong, not just on the law, but on policy. And there is a Carlos Mucha tweet here embedded. I don't know whether it elucidates what we just heard about. Oh, well, he's saying the bond market. Remember, there are two kinds of Treasury secretaries: Wall Street douchebags in town for the semester in D.C., and Texans with balls of, well, platinum. Phil Deal was brought to Treasury by fellow Texan Lloyd Benson. Would Connolly or Baker mint the coin? Of course they would. That's his claim anyway. Dylan then asks, there are a few other options for the executive to get around the debt ceiling. I wrote about a couple here, like declaring that continuing to pay the government's bills is the least unconstitutional option compared with failing to spend what Congress authorized. What do you make of these? Is it coin or bust for you, or are there other non-coin ways out? Carlos answers that at the time I started noodling around on platinum coinage, I found and wrote about two other loopholes too. One, Treasury can issue perpetual consols, C-O-N-S-O-L-S, consols, or debts that can never mature and continue paying interest forever until the government buys them back. Since there's no guarantee to repay the principal, it doesn't add to the public debt, which measures amount of guaranteed principal. And two, the Fed can just donate the Treasury securities it holds back to the Treasury. Of the three, the two above and the coin, that is, issuing consols is probably the least disruptive. Treasury can announce it is issuing T-bonds payable at the pleasure of the United States instead of a fixed term, and can hold an auction later the same day. So that's what I'd expect to see if Treasury runs out of money. Well, that's an interesting possibility as well. Perhaps we'll be hearing more about that. But, it's exciting to see that somebody in the comments section got pulled into the policy discussion as well, as opposed to just simply changing the underlying ground on which the debate was being held and then exiting for whatever reason. Okay, but that one, I think, interesting and enlightening, and also brings up another possibility if the door to the coin is actually closed at this point. All right, let's see. Probably don't have enough time for that one. We may have to save that one for going forward. Let's see. The other things I guess we could maybe shoehorn in. Here's a random story that I thought was of some interest. I probably should have thrown it up there right after the Amazon Smile story, just in terms of its randomness. But this, another thing that occasionally comes to light for us here on the show, as it happens in life, and it's weird and strange and something we never thought about before. But we'll bring it to light because why not? Something new to think about. And it is from Ars Technica, which we do now know that is exactly what it is. And we know why. And Scott explained it all to us a couple of days ago. But yes, the art of technology, essentially. Ars Technica, I guess, was the translation we're going with here. And they have this report. How about this one? Ready? Put this under, as they sometimes do. I forget who used to use this categorization of things, but saying the internet of, well, they can't even use the word by self-censorship standards here, but the internet of the S word, the internet of crap, just all this, the internet of things being an internet of essentially garbage. Check this out. U.S. school runs lights 24/7, 365. Why is that? Why would you leave the lights on in your school all 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year? Because the smart lights that they put in aren't that smart, I guess, and have been broken since 2021. We've been doing everything we can to fix this, says a school official. Ron Amadeo writes this for Ars Technica, and it is a current piece from the 20th of this year. The lights at Massachusetts's, ready for this one, Minnechaug, I hope that's correct or even near the pronunciation, Minnechaug Regional High School, burn ever bright. They actually never turn off. They can't turn off. The smart lighting system for the entire building is broken, and it's stuck in the on position. It has apparently been this way for over a year now, and the electric bills are really starting to pile up. By the way, I note the absence of solar panels from their roof, and maybe that would be a good idea at this point if they can't turn the damn things off. But okay. We are very much aware this is costing taxpayers a significant amount of money, the school district's Assistant Superintendent of Finance, Aaron Osborne, told NBC News. and we've been doing everything we can to get this problem solved. The school's entire green lighting system, some 7,000 lights, was installed over a decade ago. Sounded like a good idea at the time. And it was supposed to save money, but according to the report, the software that runs it failed on August 24th, 2021. And no one has been able to turn off the lights for the following 17 months. Wow. Teachers are adjusting by unscrewing light bulbs at the end of the day and throwing some breakers not connected to vital parts of the school. Dimming the lights to show movies or something projected on a whiteboard has also been difficult. The lights are on full brightness all the time. News editor Lily DeGrand, writing for Minnechaug student newspaper The Smoke Signal, did some great reporting on the situation the month after it started. The smart lighting company that installed the lights over 10 years ago, Fifth Light, has apparently changed hands several times now and is currently owned by a company called Reflex Lighting. According to the Smoke Signal report, what's left of Fifth Light no longer has access to the old proprietary software to fix anything. So fixing the system really means replacing it with new hardware. The problem with new parts is that this has all been in the middle of the pandemic and a huge chip shortage, so the parts have been back-ordered and delayed several times. The process of fixing the system was originally supposed to start in February of last year, but they couldn't get the parts. They missed the date again in October of last year, and the school isn't expecting a repair until even the beginning of next month. The lights remain on, and it is a lesson in proper smart building design, says our writer here. Even if you aren't in charge of the lighting design of a giant building, there's a valuable lesson here for anyone getting involved with smart home or building technology. Make technology an addition to your setup, not a dependency. You still need to install physical light switches in every room, but as a bonus, you can pick light switches that are also controllable via some kind of network. All sorts of smart light switches meet this requirement. Normal paddles and even toggles that can also be controlled via Zigbee, Z-Wave, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, probably Ethernet, whatever you want. This way, if the internet is down, or some server explodes, or some cloud company shuts down, the lights will still work. What you definitely shouldn't do is hardwire the electricity to be always on and then hope that the network to the light fixtures or the light bulbs will be around to power them off. That's apparently what happened to this school, and now taxpayers are paying the price.
NetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
I don't know, wild, hilarious story. But now, time for other wild and hilarious stories on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Justice Putnam coming up next, right here on Netroots Radio. Starting things off, Joe Manchin went full Manchin on the debt ceiling, classified documents as well, running for president and high-fiving cinema in Davos for saving the filibuster. Next.